late great 97.9 The Loop. It's the Pandemic Talk Show featuring TJ Shannon and the Stay at Home Orchestra. Today's guests, Amara Enyia, Dana and Julia, Will Klinger, and now Jonathan Brandmeier to my Kevin Matthews, Justin Kaufman.
Yeah! Yes, how about that? I'll take that all day. What does that make TJ? If I'm Brandmeier and you're Kevin Matthews, what does that mean?
I'm the animal stories guy. No, that makes me Robert Murphy of Murphy in the Morning.
I want to be Bruce Wolf before he kind of went right wing wacko. Remember, he was such a great sports guy. And I love Bruce, but it's hilarious. Like, you watch him on Twitter now, he's all like hardcore right wing dude, not the sports guy from the 80s and 90s.
Still, I did see him do Vehicle at karaoke once in Highwood, and he had a lovely voice. Terrible politics, lovely voice.
Never been to Highwood, but it sounds like a wonderful night. I like high, I like wood.
The wettest town on the North Shore.
Welcome to the Pandemic Talk Show. Justin Kaufman here, and we've got a tremendous show lined up today. Dana and Julia are going to join us in a little bit. Great sketch duo from the 90s to the early 2000s who went on to Hollywood stardom. We'll talk with them about those days. Scott, you actually were in groups with them back in the day?
That's true.
Improv groups.
I mean, we all go through an improv group phase. At some point, you grow up north side of Chicago. At some point, if you're not in an improv group, you have to move.
Are you out of yours, Scott? Are you still in an improv group phase?
I think I'm done. I mean, the pandemic has certainly put a crimp into the performing end of it. I still occasionally will do, I'll do Koo Coach and Pippin with Mary Catherine. And I have a group called Crosstown Classic with Maggie Winters. And she's from Beverly. I'm from the near north side. So
it's all sports themed improv.
I mean, yeah, basically it's actually not sports themed actual performances, but it's Chicago centric. Because when you're doing a show for people in Chicago, why not make it?
Yeah, you got to make Chicago references, right?
I do a one-man show at the Conservatory after it's closed.
After it's in
the rafters.
Conservatory still open, or is that place gone?
I think it's still there. It's next to the.
I like that. I like that.
Next to the restaurant that the health department keeps shutting down, but they have that incredible duck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. All right. Also, Will Klinger is going to join us a little bit later, or I should say William Flugel, the travel expert, second only to Rick Steves in terms of travel expertise in the world. We'll talk with William Flugel, and Amara Enyia is coming up in just a second. Before we do that, TJ Sanoff, how are you, buddy?
Folks, hey, fuck you. I mean it, hey, fuck you. Hey, fuck you now. I'm talking to you, John Cass. Fuck you. Fuck John. Did you read his drivel this morning? It's one of those days where you want to cancel your Tribune subscription. I'm one of 8 people that still subscribes, and you just kind of want to cancel it.
Got you riled up over John Cass, huh?
Yeah, because he's got the wrong opinion on everything. He's like, some people are wrong some of the time. He's wrong all of the time.
He used to smoke out in front of the Trib Tower when I worked at GN, so I would, and we're friendly, and I'd always kind of hang out there with him for a little bit, and he would always call me the resident commie in the Tribune building. So I had that going for me, which was nice. We spent a lot of time on the air talking. He's a good guy. But yeah,
I think he's an opportunist. I think he found an audience and he's driving it home.
When we were doing Schadenfreude shows in the late 90s, we did a bit just like very similar, TJ, to that, not to the great song that you put
I'm a songwriter.
Right. But we did a bit, and the same sentiment was in there, and it got wind to him. And he came up to Rogers Park on a Friday night to see the show. And it was like bigger than having celebrities in the house, to like agents or anything like that. The whole crowd knew he was there. So when the joke came along and Adam said, "I'm fucking John Cass," or whatever it was, the whole place like did a huge clap in the standing room, knowing he was in this small black box theater in the bowels of Rogers Park. But yeah, so we hung out with him at the Red Line Tap afterwards for like an hour and a half, drinking, talking Chicago's politics stories.
I love when the target of your satire shows up to the show. We did a show called Waiting for Drew Peterson at the Annoyance, and on opening night, his lawyer showed up.
Even better. Did he have the one with the cool sunglasses? That lawyer?
Joel? No, it was Joel Brodsky.
Yeah, Brodsky, right. Brodsky's good. Scott, you got the question.
Hold on a sec. I just got to say, I do have a lot of respect for John Cass. He's Mr. City Guy from his home in Western Springs for the last 20 years.
Did you see that this week?
I did. He's finally back in the city after 20 years talking dems and don'ts about city living from his palatial suburban estate. Hey, fuck you, John Cass.
Let's get Cass on the show. Let's get him on the show next week.
I think, please, we need to have him on now.
I got his phone number. I'll call him. All right, what do you got for question of the day, Scott?
Question of the day today, it's simple. What new skill have you picked up in quarantine? What hobby have you picked up? What's your skill? What are you doing now that you didn't do before you were in your house for so much of the time?
Well, we have such a robust following on Facebook and YouTube and comments.
People watching, they're going to share with us.
Scott will read it. Mine is, I think mine is going to be mixing tequila. Like I found a bottle of tequila in the back of the liquor cabinet that was like all dusty, but it hadn't been opened. And so I was like, this is amazing. So now I have every night I'm experimenting with different mixers to find the right tequila drink because it was almost like I was gifted a whole bottle of tequila. And I have yet to succeed on what's the right liquor because it all tastes like shit. But it's a good skill. What about you, Scott?
Me, nothing really new. I've discovered that I feel it's stupid wearing this shirt because last night I woke myself up in the middle of the night with my own fart. And I feel like that's a skill that I haven't really picked up, but I've mastered the art of during the day of just strategically placing them throughout the day to make my wife laugh. But then I can't control it at night. At night, it's just a symphony. And it wakes me out of my bizarre quarantine dreams. So I'm thankful for them.
Yeah, true love. It sounds like true love.
It is.
Quarantine Dream is my favorite Fleetwood Mac album.
It is. It's a great one. Christine McVie's great on that one.
All right. Well, we got a great show. Let's get to it. Our first guest today. She ran for mayor. She's a community activist and educator in Chicago. And I've always enjoyed doing different radio, and I'm happy to have her here on the Pandemic Talk Show. Give it up for Amara Enyia. Amara, welcome to the Pandemic Talk Show. Yeah. Gotta work. There she is. And gold. I like that. Yeah. What's up? Good to see you. Good to see you. How you been?
I've been very good. Very good.
Where are you sheltering? Are you here in Chicago?
I'm actually, at the moment, I'm out with my parents. So, just manning the ship, so to speak.
Are they political, or are you always lecturing them at the dinner table?
Actually, they're quite political. Political. So they probably watch more politics and news than I do at this point. So they're lecturing you. Sometimes, yes. Sometimes.
A lot. I mean, obviously, there's a lot to talk about. Obviously, we've seen the last time we spoke, and we're now in a pandemic, and Chicago has certainly changed since when you ran on the campaign trail for just what seems like not even a year ago. But let's first talk about one thing I know because I've talked to you about the west side of Chicago, and I saw this story a couple days ago about the I don't know what they call it, like they give tickets for congregants for too many people being in one spot. Yeah. And somebody did a study of where those tickets were coming from, and it's primarily almost exclusive south and west sides of Chicago. Now, I don't have to, I can walk around my neighborhood, and I live in the West Loop, and see a ton of people breaking what would be social distancing laws and requirements in the parks, but I don't see people slapping tickets. What's going on here? I mean, do you see that as just a symptom of racism here in Chicago, or is it something different that I'm not seeing? Why only tickets on the south and west side?
Well, I think we're seeing just the disparity in enforcement. I think this speaks to the history of racism in Chicago, but also it speaks to the sort of emptiness of the language around rhetoric and how regulations are being enforced. So yes, more tickets have been given out for social distancing, primarily on the south and west side. We even had a situation where you had to show your driver's license in a block on the west side. I think it was in Austin, to get to your house. You had to show police your driver's license to get there. So there was an increase in police presence also. And then a couple of days ago, they just came out with the report that all almost all of the arrests for social distancing violations have been Black folks in the city of Chicago. Almost all of the arrests from, I think, March 20th to May 21st, they've all been Black folks, with the exception of, I think, 2 individuals who are juveniles, so they didn't release any information on them. So we're seeing that the data is showing that there's a disparity in the enforcement of social distancing. Anecdotally, you can go to many other parts of the city to see that the rules are not being followed, but the enforcement hasn't followed the language about equity and how we address the social distancing order.
It was interesting. This weekend we saw violence numbers that had been the highest in 4 years, and I saw a lot of different outlets seize on that to talk once again about Chicago violence. And I hate to be, I hate to ever bring it up because I feel so callous. But when you look at the numbers, you're like 49 people were shot on the Memorial Day weekend. If this was 2010. 2012, you'd be like, hallelujah, that's nothing, right? Like it's all in a strange way, it's all relative, like to where we're at. But it is interesting that even in this pandemic, you're seeing opponents of the city, opponents of whether it be political persuasion, whatever, seizing on this opportunity to say violence is out of control.
Yeah, I mean, the numbers were definitely high, but they're always high over Memorial Day weekend. And so the numbers were the highest, I think they said, since like 2015. I think what's in this case, because we're in a pandemic where people are supposed to be staying home, there was probably an assumption that, okay, well, shootings might go down, incidents of violence might go down. And we're seeing that that's absolutely not the case. Obviously, it's continuing on, whether the shelter in place is in order or not. And so I think that kind of throws people off because we're assuming that hoping at least that the numbers will be down because after all, everyone's supposed to be at home.
Yeah. I was fascinated when I was watching you talk about the public bank and this concept of what to do with our money. And this is something I've railed upon. I feel like we've lost sight that the idea that during this pandemic, as taxpayers, we pay into the government. That's the whole idea of what the government is. And there should be some sort of support coming back, especially for people laid off or unemployment. But now we've gotten into this political circus in Washington and even in Illinois, where it's all about bailouts and the bad words and pull yourself up by the bootstraps. But this idea that we've lost sight that it's our money. At the end of the day, the money that is funding governments and everywhere else is ours. And there is some sort of, I believe, some sort of responsibility for that government to give it back.
That's absolutely the case. And that's the whole push behind the public banking movement. I'm on the National Advisory Board for the Public Banking Institute, and we've been pushing for this because it is our money that actually funds the government. And so what's happening now is our taxpayer dollars are going to actual private banking institutions who in 2008 received a bailout, who currently we saw that they benefited from as middlemen on the PPP program. They collected billions of dollars in fees. They also played fast and loose with the requirements, front loading their preferred customers. So we're seeing a lot of the practices that have really been harmful to our economy as a whole. We also saw the government able to loan $1 trillion a day to the banking industry, while at the same time we're talking about what we can afford and can we afford to give direct payments of $1,200 to our residents. So essentially we're not getting what we're paying for. So with the public bank, we actually use those tax dollars to, the public bank is actually capitalized with tax dollars, but those dollars are only recirculated into the economy. They only go to paying for, say, infrastructure projects for the city. We avoid bad bank deals where we're wasting millions of dollars on these bad deals that were put in place with our private financial banks. We also can issue loans, low interest loans. Public banks actually support those community banks and gives them more ability to actually lend to the customers, the residents, the business owners that will most benefit and that have been victims of redlining in the past. So it's about the systemic changes that we need to make to our economic system, our financial system. And instead of really, so we've been very vocal, and I've been doing a lot more around this work because the language has really been this panicked, bailouts, and then after that, everything goes back to normal. We can't go back to normal.
Right.
We can't afford to go back to normal.
Well, we're gonna. That's the worst part. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I feel like everyone says that. It's such a great line. What we knew yesterday, where tomorrow's gonna be different. And then we're like, oh man, I can't wait to be done with this so I can eat a hamburger. It's like, what the, we don't give a shit. Like, we all want to go back to some sort of normal. The one thing I will say, and I feel like every time I have you on at different times, it always ends up where I want to talk about light topics and then we get into serious topics because you're great on these topics. But man, this has been a really bad week for race relations in America.
Oh man.
From what happened in Central Park, which I'm still floored by, to the incident in Minnesota, which we are now seeing, again, a video piece, which is very similar to the issues that we've had here in Chicago and the issues that we've had in this country for the last couple of years. You ran for mayor in Chicago. One of the issues that was top of mind was the consent decree, was retraining officers, was trying to deal with the fact that there are disparities when it comes to, as you just mentioned, enforcement, police enforcement in different communities. When you see something like this and it gets the public outcry where people are just, I think across the board, I mean, some aren't, of course, but, are saying enough is enough. What can be done? I mean, does it really come down to police training? Does it come down to what can be done in these kind of situations? Because it seems like we're just in this vicious cycle of repeating it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing now is, I mean, the anger is understandable. I mean, this week has really been a lot. Everything from the situation with Christian Cooper and Amy Cooper in New York. And the reality is that happens in the workplace, that happens in your organizations. So you can take it even outside of the context of the ramble in New York City and think about examples where racism or race has been used to weaponize against a person of color, against a Black person. And so the ubiquitousness of the ubiquity of that kind of situation, I think, is what's very disheartening. In Minnesota, I think the first thing was the swift action, the fact that the four police officers were immediately fired. Although that's not enough, they definitely have to be additional repercussions, but that happened within a day that it was announced. And I think that is the kind of action that people want to see to believe that there is any redemptive factor in our justice system. There needs to be more.
It has to be, right? It has to be.
It
you can't be in a situation where they go, we're fired and that's it. And sorry,
exactly.
There has to be some repercussion. Otherwise, what de-incentivize that kind of behavior?
Exactly. And or a situation, for example, in the Ahmaud Arbery case, which is recently, now it feels like years ago, where that happened in 2 months past and no one did anything. Everyone was okay with the outcome until the video came out. And then they started to act. They started to say, okay, we've actually got to do something. Those kinds of situations are the ones that make people feel that there's no hope, that there's no redemptive factors in the justice system. And so I think the counter to that is to show that, yes, there will be actions taken, that they will go the full extent. And also that we can't, think about Chicago. One of the biggest issues after the whole Paul McDonald piece, we were going to put another $100 million into a police training facility. It's just sending a message to the residents about what's important. And now we're finding that not just the 100 million, but the mayor wants an even bigger training facility. And we know that that's not the core of the solution. All of the other components that go into creating safe, stable communities, that's where our investments need to go. And so again, those who are in leadership have to show that we're willing to do things differently, not just putting more cops on the street. Try that, doesn't work. Not just putting more money into the police budget while the rest of our budgets are actually dwindling. We know that doesn't work because it's what we've been doing for the last several years.
Yeah, I can listen to you all day. Good. Amara, always a pleasure to have you here and to have you on the Pandemic Talk Show. Amara Enyia, ladies and gentlemen, give it up for Amara. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank
Amara.
you, Amara.
We'll talk, next time you're on, we're not doing any politics. We're just talking about music or something.
She gone.
We'll just like, you're gone.
No, that's very efficient. We got it right off. But
Our new
she's
producer
incredible.
Will's like, I don't have time for banter. You said it was over. You gotta let it go.
She gone.
She's great. We didn't even talk about Chance the Rapper. See how we're moving past that because she ran on a campaign where Chance was her big.
endorser.
benefactor, right? Or
Is
endorsement.
there weird like Chance the Rapper? Like I love Chance. Is there blowback against Chance? Like society works so weird now. I read a piece a few months ago that like now people are in it for are on Chance the Rapper. What is that?
He didn't give enough. He didn't give enough money to
Crazy.
the right people. Right. Well,
I
you know,
like
Chance.
I like
Chance put
Chance.
his- yeah. Chance
You know,
put
Chance
his,
used to come to Thunderdome, which was a Chicago improv show at Studio B on Sheffield, run by Carmen Christopher and then Nate Ferrone and then Megan Sullivan and Alan Giles. Just want to give everybody their credits. Chance used to show up with some Jones College prep kids back in 2013.
I firmly believe that Sunday Candy is one of the best songs of the last decade. It's
There's
just
Steve
great.
James. I wanted to ask Amara about it. I forgot, but Steve James, the guy who did Hoop Dreams, did a film, and I think it's out or it's coming out, or maybe I was just going to ask her about it. Was following her campaign for mayor. I think it's out. It was like a documentary they put on TV or something like that. But the idea that it followed her and this idea of trying to get young people to vote for mayor. So interesting. We'll get Steve on.
Who'd you vote for, Goldie? You sound like you're about to say who you voted for.
You could probably guess who I voted for. I voted in the runoff election. I voted for the African-American woman.
That's
And
right.
was
That's
Tony.
right.
So it was either Tony or Lori. So I voted for Tony or Lori.
I liked both. I voted for Lori, but I like oh, excuse me. I lied. We moved to Evanston just before the mayoral election. It's the first Chicago election I've not voted in.
So you voted in spirit.
I did. I would have voted for Lori, but I like Preckwinkle too.
He mailed it in. That's what Trump's talking about. He mailed it in, and he's like, "No, you know, TJ's if he's a fraud."
That guy.
I think if you live all the way up to Linden Avenue, you should be able to vote
you're
in the
fine.
Chicago mayoral election. You get north of Linden, and you're out.
Yeah,
That
when
might be
the
a good
L
transition.
stops.
That might be a good transition because we're talking about
Might be a
travel.
transition. We're talking
didn't-
about travel.
We're talking about travel, and you know, it's interesting because I realize now that you know those travel shows that we love so much. You know, they're all affected, of course, with the coronavirus restrictions, but they're letting up, which is good. So maybe it's time to start thinking about travel. But you and I, Goldie, you know this. You don't want to look like an idiot when you go abroad. You want to be confident. You want to be just like you want to be like
a
Rick
local,
Steves, right?
like a local,
Yeah.
like you live
You
in
don't look like the local, like Rick Steves, or even better, William Flugel, who just went to Portugal, which looks lovely. And he joins us now. The real deal of traveling abroad and looking like you know what you're doing. Bring him in, William Flugel. Real travel expert on this show. Pretty great.
William Flugel.
Video button. Close, William. Get your fanny pack out of the.
William Flugel, travel expert.
That's the only
Start your
go-go
video.
song I know how to play.
It's
Is
pretty good, man.
Vacation.
He played the
So
whole thing.
I think there he is. Okay.
there he is.
What's up,
to be
William?
with
How are
you.
you?
Oh, I'm just fantastic. You know, I'm so glad that you're obviously a loyal viewer of my show,
Yeah.
William Flugel's Travel Adventures with William Flugel. I guess I'm confused. Justin, why you haven't put your name on your own. Why isn't it the pandemic show with Justin Theroux? I don't understand.
Yeah. Well, you know, I mean, Justin Kaufman, but it's close.
Here's
I would
my
take.
point. If you put your name on it, I'd know you weren't not dating Jennifer Aniston. That's the.
How are you holding up? How are you holding up without being able to travel right now with all the restrictions?
Not well, Justin. Yeah, as you know, you saw our show that we shot in Portugal, which was actually Lisbon, actually one neighborhood in Lisbon. But you know, we shot that show, and darn it, if this whole pandemic thing didn't come down right about after that. So we've been on a forced hiatus, and golly, it's tough when you love travel as much as I do, and want to get out there. You know, I did try traveling internationally for a while after this thing happened.
You did. What was that like?
Yeah, I'm used to packing light, but I had to pack a ventilator, and I actually brought a dive helmet with me just to be safe. And you know, One of the things I will tip people to immediately is don't lick anything on the plane. Don't lick anything. And I've been known to lick the tray when there's crumbs. Don't do it.
Don't do that, right?
If the screen is smudged, I'll lick it clean. Not anymore. You see what I'm saying?
Practical. That's practical advice. You're right. I'm a licker as well, so
Obvious.
that would have been.
It might
Yeah.
seem obvious, but I'm going to give myself some lighting. Look at that.
That's good. Look at that. You're a one-man band over there. So let's talk about, I mean, you are a world traveler. I mean, you are just, it's unbelievable the information you pack into an episode. Portugal, give us some advice on Portugal. Like what, if we want to be like the locals there, what do we need to know?
Good thing, try to learn some of the local language. You know, even if it sounds ridiculous, like the Portuguese language, try it on for size. Learn, I like to, I don't learn the whole language, Justin. I just learn key phrases that might get me through the day. In Portugal, for instance, what is that in your teeth? I might just learn that in Portuguese. And it comes in handy. That comes in handy in the Balkans, by the way, as well. And also in some parts of the Deep South. But I try to learn some of the darn language. I won't hesitate to try the food. You gotta try the food, even if it induces, nausea. I'll sometimes cause projectile vomiting just trying some of this Portuguese food, because boy, it is not for everybody. I'll tell you that. But just try to be local. It's a good advice that you just gave, and I think it's true.
Yeah, no, I guess I'd ask the question we're all want to know the answer to is it fanny pack or money belt? Which one are you going for when you travel?
Always the money belt. And I'll wear it around a string around my neck, and it'll fit under my clothing and even under my belt, under my actual belt. So that, it's kind of a pain in the neck to have to actually undress to get money. I'll have to drop my pants quite often just to get at my coins and change and cash. But it really is, it keeps you safe, and you don't have to worry about where's that passport of mine. I always got it right at my crotch.
Right at the crotch. That's the
Sure I do.
That's the William Flugel way. All right, my last question for you. What else should we be prepared for besides licking or not licking when we get back to travel? Well,
here's the thing. Let's take the here and now, because we don't know what the future brings. Throw out a few of the countries, Justin, that you want to go to, and I'll tell you if I think it's worthwhile and safe.
Okay, of course, Paris. Would love to go.
Oh,
to Paris.
Don't go there, for God's sake.
Yeah.
Are you kidding?
All right. How about the Bahamas?
Stay away from the Bahamas. Are you nuts? That place is up. One more.
All right, and then I think the last one, I'll just take a stab in the dark. Wuhan, China.
You stupid son of a bitch! How could you even suggest that? Listen, get me off the air. I'm leaving.
You're leaving. William Flugel, ladies and gentlemen, our favorite travel expert. Check him out.
Looks a lot like Will Klinger.
Yeah. Will Klinger from Wild Chicago, yeah.
Very
I like the
similar
licking the tray. Licking the tray. We got a read here, Dana Julia coming up right next, and then find out if anyone is telling what they learned in the quarantine.
Well, they always say lick your plate clean, but Off Their Plate is a grassroots nonprofit that partners with impacted chefs and restaurant owners to provide meals to healthcare workers on the front lines of our fight against COVID-19 and provide economic relief to the restaurant workers affected most acutely by the pandemic. If you were looking at the faces I'm looking at, you'd understand why I'm laughing right now. They're working in Boston, San Francisco, New York City, Los Angeles, Pittsburgh, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Philly, and Seattle. So far, delivered more than 25,000 meals across the country, including thousands right here in Chicago, where they work with 7 restaurants and 20 health facilities. Anyone interested in more information can go to offtheirplate.com. That's offtheirplate.com. If only the audience could see what I'm seeing.
I think they can.
I think they can, yeah.
Oh, boy. I certainly hope they can. Hi, ladies.
Oh, yes. Welcome to the studio, Dana Julia. How are you? Good to see you.
Hello. Shalom. Is this the podcast? Are we on?
Yes, you're on.
How
my
are you
God.
guys? Are you both in LA?
We sure are, but we don't live together. So don't assume that.
Yeah, we're not lesbians, guys.
Jesus.
Ding.
How are you enjoying the sheltering in place? I know, assuming LA, that's the goal. There,
Actually, this is the first time in 26 years Julie and I have gone 2 months without seeing each other.
Wow.
It's so hard. It's so hard.
So
You're not
hard
doing
to
that thing where you're like go out in the yard and pretend like that's okay. And
What
you put two
yard?
chairs- What yard?
What yard? Who do you think
I don't
we
have
are?
a yard. I don't have a yard. I figured you all lived in those little houses in LA with that backyard that people say is a yard, but it's just a one little piece of
No.
grass.
No. Scott,
Yes.
I
Hi.
love your shirt.
Thank
Scott,
you.
I like the fart too.
I wore it. I wore it for you, ladies.
Scott,
'cause I
remember
thought
when you
you'd
farted in bed with us?
appreciate- Can we clarify that I was trying to study for an exam?
We were in New York.
I
New
know.
York was
Locked
Susan
out.
Messon's wedding. We got locked out of our hotel. We came
No,
to
we
stay
got
with
locked up
you.
with my brothers.
Oh
we got-
yes, that's right.
We got locked out of my brothers, so we had to go to Scott Goldstein's hotel room, sleep in bed with them. And as soon as we got in bed, he farted.
We made him get into the middle, and he just started farting and farting and farting.
They made me get into the middle, and not only did they make me get in the middle, the whole night I was just trying to sleep. For God's sake, I had an early flight, and all I keep hearing is, "Ew! Don't! You're thinking about touching me? Don't touch me! Ew! Stop touching me!
Is that you inside?
Stop
of me?
getting a boner!" No.
Oh no, that was
Oh.
Julia.
I think I was farting. I think my body reacted in a defensive mode and tried to fart you away.
Didn't
Bullshit.
work.
I was
What
trying to attract
groups?
somebody.
What
still here,
improv
Scott.
groups were you guys? What improv groups were you guys on together? Do you remember?
Amateur show-offs.
Chicago's finest improv group, named after an amateur porn magazine.
Called amateur show-offs. We were not anyone that Sharna put us on together, though, right? It was just amateur show-offs.
Julia and I were on Deep Schwa
Oh yeah,
together.
that's right.
We
So
sure.
horny.
Hi, TJ.
Hi,
Hi,
Julia.
TJ.
Hi, Dana. Hi, guys.
Haven't seen you in so long, buddy.
I miss you both.
I miss you.
Are you washing up?
No, it's I got the mask on. A mask means
TJ
you don't
hasn't
have to
left the
wash.
bathroom.
No, I live
He
here now.
doesn't- That's the only place he's got any private place. In
You
his
can't
house.
poop just everywhere, so I stay in the room I like.
I love it. I hear Dell's gonna be a guest today.
Is he dead yet?
No.
No.
He's been in hiding.
He's
Hey,
alive. in
guys.
our heart.
Get
I-
Greg's on the phone.
I saw you guys do a great show at that weird space that was next to Second City at the Piper's Alley during the Chicago Comedy Festival.
Oh my
maybe
God.
20 years ago or so.
Oh,
And it was
yeah.
such a great show, and there was so much buzz around that, and you guys nailed it. Take us back to that time, because that was really what it was like. A month later, you guys were gone. I felt like that was the ticket out of Chicago after that and Aspen, right? Was that a showcase for Aspen? I feel like that was all at the same time.
It was right around the same time, but it was a crazy time, actually. Julie and I started our show, and then she got hired at Second City as an understudy. So we had to put our show on hold for a year. And then we ended up getting into the Comedy Fest a year later. And it was just so great. And then it took off, and we were gone.
Dana made
It really was. I mean, it felt like it was like that. It was over, right? It was like,
It was great.
It
Yeah.
was all in God's hands after that show.
Are you grateful that you took that time to understudy?
Yeah, it was great. I loved it.
You
I
made
loved sitting on the bench.
You made $70 a month for a year. It's a wonderful.
It's the dream.
I begged Julia to quit for me, and she did, and she ran into my hairy arms. And here we are now.
well, at that time when you guys were doing that show, that specific show was directed by Mick, right? Mick Napier.
Yeah.
What was it for you to be where you guys are and to have had success you've had, to think about Mick and directing that show? Did that help? The help that gets you guys up in that stage and everything that he sort of put you guys together, or is it just another director flash in the pan kind of thing?
No way. He is not just another director in any way, shape, or form. Susan Messing originally started as our director, and then we switched to Mick, and the show just exploded. We could not have done what we've done without Susan or Mick. Mick really just took it home. You don't pass up an opportunity to work with either of them. Right, Julia?
I mean, these two before Dana and Julia, I mean, there was like one woman allowed on an improv team together, and they weren't allowed to talk about their femininity.
Yeah.
Well, you remember what happened to us at Improv Olympics,
You got
Scott?
split up. You were on Jesus and Tequila, right?
I
You
sure was.
and Sharna wouldn't let you play together. So we made a
Because-
team where you could play together because you were too dirty.
Because
No.
we said
Jewish?
vagina. We said vagina on stage too many times. She said if we said it one more time, she's going to break us up, and we did. All we said was vagina our next show, and she split us up for 6 years.
What? Wow.
Boy, we showed her.
Showed her. Look at us.
Oh,
We
what
don't
do
have
you
a
guys-
backyard.
In all this weirdness, has Hollywood stopped? I mean, are you still taking meetings and doing all that kind of stuff? But it just can't
No.
shoot anything? No.
Our
Is it just
agent-
everything? Go ahead.
Our agent dropped us because
What?
we put on Facebook. There's a big
Oh, tweet.
a tweet. We tweeted that like about a year ago, like everybody had to fire their agents because of the WGA thing. So we put on Twitter, I can't believe we have to fire our agents who've never gotten us a job. And they saw it.
They
They're
saw
like,
it. You ungrateful comedy duo that we didn't work for.
Exactly.
Pretty much.
Yeah.
We're writing on our own, but right now it is so slow.
Is it? Yeah, I wonder about if it's one of those situations where, I mean, because half of Hollywood or 90% of it is just meetings, right? And then all at one point something gets greenlit. This is just
People who are doing anything, or like you guys, or podcasts, or anything online, or the people who are still doing stuff.
yeah, that seems to be it, right?
We're just
We have a huge
sitting-
audience.
Yeah, we're doing fucking great.
Look at you guys.
Look,
69
Monty's
people
watching. Monty's watching. We've made it.
Monty.
Monty, nice. For you guys, what's next? What are you working on? What are you writing? I know that you were just doing the Princess show, and
Yep.
then so what's next for you now?
We're
Julia,
writing.
tell 'em.
I'll tell you. We're writing we're just finishing a script, a dark comedy, and we're writing a book
Yeah.
Nice.
about human sexuality.
Wow. I was
And
wondering
bubble.
when that was going to come out, right? That's the first thing I said when I saw you guys on stage. I'm like, they're really gonna kill it in the human
Yeah.
sexuality field.
Yeah.
They get into academia, they're gonna kill it.
We're going to start teaching at University of Chicago.
There you go.
Where it all began.
Where it all began.
Dana, does
Well,
your
I was-
poster say shalom? Is there a poster on your wall that says shalom, or am I
Yes.
imagining that?
No,
Okay.
no.
Okay. Sorry.
It says
It's not
peace-
just a shalom. Okay, it's
it says Peace in
multicultural.
every language.
Okay. All I can see was the shalom.
Peace in every language. That's all I want. Peace.
That's all you want.
Yeah.
That's all. How it's such an interesting. I asked a lot of people who are working in entertainment and it's just a question of how have you adapted to the idea that you can be successful in the sense that you get your show or you write on a show and that show can last 6 months, it can last 2 years, but you're ultimately always judged on what your next thing is or what the next project is, even if you're not judged, but just the idea that there's that anxiety around the next gig. That how do you deal with that as two people who have been successful but have to every year come up with a new thing?
I'll tell you what, it gets worse every job we get. Because we think, oh, we're in the clear. Look at all the stuff we've done. And then all of a sudden the job is over and we're like, oh my God, now what? Now what do we do? And nobody cares what we just did. So for me, I feel worse every time that now I'm getting older. It was bad then, but it's
Same question for you, Julie.
Dana's going to start working it up with people.
yeah.
How have you adjusted, Julie? Is that something you have to deal with? Like just the idea of mentally wrapping your head around that?
Yeah, you get used to it. I mean, you just get used to like, okay, you are on one season of the show. It may not get picked up. You have to just think like it probably won't. So enjoy the season and then think about what you're going to do next and try not to think like, oh, this is it, because nothing is it. Like you always have to be working on what's next. So
The only thing that's sustained in Hollywood is me and Julia's heterosexual relationship.
I was going to say
Gotta have
it's
each other,
an
man.
inspiration. I think it's hard to say anything with a straight face. Looking at your two faces, I love to see them.
Scotty,
But
can you believe we're still together?
that's what I was going to say. you know, you people come and go through all of this life and through all of this work, and you're an inspiration.
Thanks.
Scott.
Show me your balls, Scotty. Show me your balls.
Do you guys look fondly at your time in Chicago? Do you look back at that time and say, "Oh, it's been 20 years or so now"? Do you look back and be like, "That those were the days," or are you like, "Ah, fuck it, that was just"?
No, those were the days for me.
For sure.
Oh,
Maybe it's-
So hopeful.
PJ, don't even with that. That's my favorite song ever. That's my favorite song, favorite movie.
Well, we could do this. We could do this all day. But
I love you guys. You guys have been making me laugh since I just love you both. I do.
We love you so much.
Oh,
Yeah.
We should all have an orgy sometime.
Yeah.
Sounds good. That's how we usually end the pandemic talk show. With
Right?
virtual orgies. So
Okay, when the pandemic's over, you guys.
yeah, Dana and Julia.
TJ,
always a
bring the
pleasure.
towel. And that's what I
See
was
you guys.
seeing during the read of offtheirplate.com, the charitable
Yeah,
read I
right.
do on the show, and that's
know,
what I
right?
saw.
Thanks so much for being our guest tonight or today.
Love you
Thank
guys.
We love you
Love
guys.
you.
Be
Good
safe.
night. Good night.
So good, right? So fun. All right, that's gonna do it for the show. That I have to say, like Dana and Julia show, because they jumped in before the intro, but that show that I saw in Chicago was one of the best sketch shows I've ever seen. And a long lineage of great sketch shows in Chicago. And improv gets a total, you know, obviously top billing, but sketch shows and sketch groups like Dana and Julia are what keeps that whole thing together. Because that was like, it was a great show. It was great.
And to this day, when I see them, I can't stop from the moment I start talking to them to the end. I can't stop laughing, and I can't. It's too much. I can't be a professional in these kind of circumstances.
The two best sketch shows I've seen in all these years in Chicago are those two and Steve Waltine and Jordan Klepper.
That's
I mean,
a great show.
Very
Yeah.
similar shows too, like the subject
that.
matter.
I
Exceptionally
know.
very
Slow.
similar.
I saw those guys do the show in LA, like in at UCB in LA. It was like one of those things where we had a crossover where Schadenfreude was out there, and then we saw Jordan and Steve do the show. Which is awesome. All right. Awesome show today. It was a blast. It was great. We made it. We did it. We're back tomorrow with another pandemic talk show. So come on back here 4:00 for all of us, plus a great lineup tomorrow. Jeez. Mia Park's going to join us. Kelsey Huff, stand-up comedian Kelsey Huff. Michael Martin. Others, I think. I don't
Joe
know who else.
Nunez.
Joe Nunez. What am I talking? Joe Nunez.
Yeah.
Joe. How about that? Great. Joe's always a great guest. That's tomorrow here on the Pandemic Talk Show. Have a great night, everybody. Bye.
Thank you,
Bye,
Will.
everybody.
Thank you, Will.
Thank you.